The big debate on ET now last couple of days has been that are we at the big turn? Has the bull market run out of steam? After a 10%, approximately 9.5% decline on benchmark indices, how can you categorize your portfolio in three buckets? What to buy, what to sell, and what to hold? How crucial is the global interplay? When I say global interplay, the Fed seems to be changing their basic goalpost, and markets like Korea and Hong Kong are at a fresh 2001 low. So how does one connect dots here, identify opportunity? Remember, when volatility is back, it will always create great opportunity for long-term investors. To discuss all that and much more, gives me great pleasure to bring on board Shankar Sharma to take our conversation forward. Shankar, fantastic to have you back on ET Now. Thank you for joining us. Now, Shankar, on paper, it is a 10% correction, which theoretically is not a big correction, but individual stocks have corrected 15 to 20%. This is just the beginning of the winter. So are we in for a tough winter this year?
So I think the markets were anyway looking for an excuse to correct. And, all of us have been looking for this very elusive correction now for, I think, at least, 7-8 months. Usually what happens in markets is they will keep climbing the wall of any worry for a reasonable length of time. But come a point when they've rallied a lot, then, something like this Omicron virus or some other, straws in the wind, like the Fed sort of changing its stance, or at least people say it's changing. I don't think it is. All those are just mere reasons to justify a correction, which was anyway overdue. And if you look at in particular India and Indian small and mid caps, they have been, just a remarkable run from the middle of last year. And, that kind of thing simply just cannot keep going on month after month. You cannot make 5% returns every month on an aggregate portfolio. It's just not sustainable. You will and you should have months in which you're down 5 or 10%. And I think you've just seen that kind of month go past. I don't think it's the start of a bear market by any stretch. But, I think this correction was long overdue, and the reasons are coming in the form of this new virus or the Fed speak or whatever, else there might be.
Shankar, historically, you've always maintained that there is nothing called, India unique story. It is all about global connection and global correlation. So if I draw to your attention to what is happening in other emerging markets, largely the Korean market, the Brazilian market, and where Hong Kong has moved, these markets are at a fresh low for 2021, and we are massively outperforming. So do you think other markets will catch up, or we will go down?
That's a very uncomfortable question. The fact of the matter is that the Koreas and Brazils of the world did very well last year. Our markets didn't do that well this year. So last year, so we were due anyway for a sharp outperformance. But the interesting thing, Nikunj, is that if you were to compare India to, let's say, a global benchmark like the MSCI World or ACWI index, on a long-term basis, there is no significant outperformance that India has had. It is only from February in particular this year that you've seen a big, sharp sort of breakout, relative performance relative to the global benchmarks. Otherwise, India has kind of traded in line with global markets, in particular the emerging market, for a fairly long period of time. I just think in context of, let's say, Brazilian market, India is far, far better. There is no question about it. The kind of companies we have here and the kind of depth of the market and the liquidity available. India is a standout emerging market. It's almost a developed market in terms of parameters on which you want to evaluate markets, which is diversity of companies, the amount of liquidity available, the kind of trading systems, the kind of regulation. I think India is strictly first world. It really doesn't belong on this lens to emerging markets. So I think India deserves to outperform. I think it will. But it is just going to take a breather for now because it has run up too fast and in very, very short span of time.
The panic around the new virus variant, is that genuine, or we should take it with not a pinch of salt but with a bag of salt, given that there are commercials involved by global medical companies here?
I am not an expert on this, Nikunj. All I can say is that I don't think you've seen the end of viruses. That has been my view. Even after the vaccine came out, in November last year, that the vaccine is out. It's probably going to solve the problem that we are encountering, but can it solve all future problems? Because I think the virus or the mutants of the viruses are just going to keep coming, because this genie is out of the bottle. How it mutates itself, we have no idea. And the latest virus is a good case in point that we had the Delta variant, and we have had a few milestones along the way ever since the first outbreak, happened last year. So I think this is somewhat serious. I don't think it is end of the world. I think the world will figure out a way to solve this problem also. But it just gives markets a decent reason to correct it. Markets were looking for a reason to correct, and we have it right here.
Shankar, now that markets have corrected, now whether 10% is the right level or 15% is the right level, only in hindsight we can figure out. But we can certainly divide the market in three parts: buy, sell and hold. So why don't you do that for our viewers? Identify pockets which are a buy after the correction, stocks which still are a hold, which you don't want to sell because the future still looks bright, and sell stocks which are a decisive sell, whether it is because of valuations, earnings, or the change in dynamics.
I think the third category, maybe sell is a very harsh word, Nikunj, but definitely the third category are really the financials and the FMCGs, which have been the darling of markets and fund managers for last several years. That entire pack has been a total disaster in the last 15, 18 months. And for right reason, that those businesses, are fairly mature. They traded at crazy valuations. Banks were trading at very, very hefty price to books. And of course, FMCGs were trading at north of 40, 50 times earnings. We kind of kept believing they would continue to trade thus. But the reality is that expensive stocks, can undergo long periods when they deliver nothing, as Hindustan Levers and all these companies have had, multiple years in which they have delivered precisely zero returns. I think that is clearly the avoid basket. Now, in terms of the buy basket, every single thing that we like in small and mid, if you take midcap IT, nothing has changed at all. If anything, if any new virus, etc., appears, then let's hope this thing is just a mirage and doesn't cause any severe damage to life and businesses. IT remains a standout performer. Pharma might, obviously because of these problems, that's the sector you want to go and buy a bit of. That will get a fillip. But I don't think you will end up with a big lockdown, which will hurt the real businesses, the real economy businesses like, real estate or let's say consumption plays, liquor, spirits. Those are, I don't think, going to be, impacted massively. I think, but they have corrected, a few of them have corrected. I think this is a great time to go and buy them. So they are both buys and holds, and they avoid, like I said, the banks and the financials and the old line MNC and consumer discretionary companies. It's a pretty simple trade. I don't think really much has changed in the last 1.5 months' time.
So, Shankar, if you're optimistic about economy and the capex and the recovery, then why financials are an avoid? Because A, financials have underperformed, B, financials are the true proxy.
Yeah, I remember in 2007, it's exactly the same thing used to be said about infrastructure companies, right? That if India has to grow, infrastructure has to grow. Now we kind of keep forgetting what was talked about in the past, but the reality is that there is nothing called this. If this has to happen, then the other thing must happen. There is no such thing. So India may well become a country which is growing but doesn't require much bank credit. Who knows? And in any case, if we look at last several years, bank credit has not grown much. It's been consumer credit. Maybe India morphs itself into a different kind of economy. All I'm saying is that is a sector which, to my mind, is a highly cyclical sector. And in an upturn, the cycle, it doesn't necessarily mean that the upturn the benefits will flow through to these institutions, because in finance and fintech, there is a lot of disruption happening. We should not lose sight of that fact, that how the landscape for finance will change in the future, nobody can tell. But you can be pretty sure of one thing, that the banks will not be as dominant in the financial pie chart as they have been in the last 20, 30 years. And if you just take that broad thematic, you can see that maybe, just maybe, these valuations need to contract. Just as e-commerce will have contracted the valuations of FMCG companies, because in e-commerce, a shopper doesn't go to a shelf, right? He is shown advertising and he goes and clicks on the lowest price product. Unlike a retail shelf where a Hindustan Lever can buy premium space and at the eye level, those are the old economy models, but in the new economy model, things get disrupted. So I think fintech, in broad part, is a major threat for banks. And I think that's one of, if not the only reason, at least one of the major reasons to at least remain light on them.
So since financials account for nearly 35% weightage, if you feel banks and financials as a group, they are not headed anywhere in terms of market returns, so won't that cap the Nifty returns?
In a lot of senses, that has already capped the Nifty returns, hasn't it, Nikunj? That you, on the one hand, you have the consumer pack, you have the banks and financials, you have a stock like Reliance. I think all put together, maybe 60-65% of the Nifty doesn't look as if it's going to be like a sprinter. It's more like a long distance runner at a slow pace, but not definitely a, Usain Bolt kind of, runner. That those runners belonged obviously to the mid and the small cap area. And that's exactly what the market has delivered you this year. There has been nothing which the mainline stocks have delivered, which is worth writing home about. But below that, it has been a completely different universe. So you're absolutely right. The Nifty returns will probably lag the overall, let's say, basket of equity, ownership returns, which means you have mid and small apart from just a few Nifty stocks. I think Nifty will lag the broader market for sure.
Shankar, one more follow-up question on financials. I'm spending some time because it's an important distinctive thought which you're sharing with us. The routine call on financials is that economy recover kar raha hai, financials le lo, because that's the best proxy. But it's a very different debate which we are having, or different opinion. Now the purist would say that okay, fintech is great, but fintechs do not have a great liability franchise. They are in the business of only creating scale and size. And while the banks do have a balance sheet which they lack, which means that somewhere fintechs will suffer. And the Paytm example is a reminder that all the purists somewhere were right.
What is the Paytm problem? I don't understand.
The way the stock fell after listing. The way everybody is saying that, look, it's a proposition where right now you don't have a clear glide path towards profitability.
So why is the stock falling a problem? That's the question I'm asking. It is still a company, last I checked, valued at maybe 1 lakh crores or something like that. I mean, that's crazy. How long did our normal banks take to reach $15 billion market cap? Now, maybe it should have been 25 billion, maybe it's just 15 billion or 10 billion, 12 billion, whatever it is. It's still a lot of market cap. So, I mean, to say that because the listing was bad, the naysayers have been proven right is not something I buy. Not to say that I'm a big fan of the business model of fintech in general, of the kind of fintech we are seeing right now. All I'm saying is this is a nuisance value to create problems for the old line franchises of the banking industry. That is the real problem. It has nothing to do with these. It is what damage they can cause to the older, more established players in the financial services space, which is banks. It's a nuisance value. But remember, nuisance value can be a value compressor. That's all I'm saying. It's not that the banks are going to go out of business. There's no way. It's only the valuation compression and the incremental business coming from millennials, coming from the young people. Can fintech service those customers better than your Kotak banks and the HDFC banks? That's a real question here.
Shankar, you're a great tape reader. Over the years, we've interacted on various forums. You've said that, look, identifying returns in equity, identifying patterns in equity market is very, very important. And equity returns are bunched up. So what is your tape reading indicating?
My tape reading very simply says this, that markets have been really significantly overbought for the last few months. They were looking for an excuse to correct, and you got the excuse in form of this virus or Fed or whatever it is. But this is not a bear market by any stretch. I mean, I know companies, dozens of them, in the smaller segment, looking at very strong numbers, strong outlooks, very, fairly visible outlooks. But if those stocks are down 25, 30%, I think the brave should go out and buy them, because I don't think structurally anything has changed in the equity story, whether in India or globally. So I think you should welcome these corrections rather than debate them to the point that we start getting scared about them. I think you should welcome corrections, and I think this is a very welcome opportunity to buy some good companies 20% cheaper.
Okay. So specifically talk about autos. There is a lot of yes and no. One side you got this re-rating in Tata Motors and the de-rating in Hero MotoCorp. The re-rating in Tata Motor is because they want an EV investor. The de-rating in Tata, Hero Electric and Maruti is because they are not serious about the EV business. What should one do?
So I mean, I don't own any auto, so I'm speaking, with my feet. I mean, I think there are just easier ways to make money in this market rather than buying the old line auto companies. And we don't even know whether the EV story in India is going to pan out the way people expect it to. So I think there's so many imponderables out there, that I'm better off focusing on non-auto plays rather than going back again to the comfort of a Maruti. And remember, Nikunj, we've loved Maruti for decades, right? I mean, right from the time it listed in 2008 or something like that. But you need to move on. You need to move on. I mean, there's nothing called permanent love in equity markets, at least. So you move on. At least I have moved on. And I think investors, unless you're an institutional fund manager, I think as a normal retail investor, business really going and buying, these old line auto companies.
So currently in the market, what are you excited about? What are you infatuated about? Because there's nothing called permanent in market. It's all about finding opportunity. Apart from liquor stocks, which you mentioned in the past, where else you see value or potential of return?
Well, like I said, mid-cap, small-cap IT is great. I mean, there are innovative companies that they're doing very well. Again, nothing damages that business at all, because, whether there is COVID or COVID-2, COVID-4, or there is none. I mean, either way, those guys are benefiting. They've benefited massively. That's been a good bet for us for the last 15, 18 months. And I continue to like that space. And there are many segments opening up within the overall, let's say, tech space in India. I think that space is buzzing. Continue to remain very excited about that space.
There's an acronym called FANG, Shankar, which in a sense has created a lot of wealth for US investors. If you bought into Facebook, Alphabet, Google, and Netflix. What could be that FANG acronym for India for next couple of years?
I think we need to see listings. India traditionally has been deficient in the tech space. We've had IT services, but not so much tech. But I think a lot of new companies are hitting the markets, will continue hitting the markets. And some of them will really become very innovative companies. I don't have the acronym packed just yet, but hopefully in the next few months' time, I will have a few for you for sure.
3-4 new tech companies, whether it is a combination of Zomato, Nykaa, Policy Bazaar, maybe one more when companies go public, and just sit on them for next couple of years and they can create wealth, because markets are underestimating the true potential of what some of these businesses can achieve. I mean, who would have thought what a DMart could achieve or a Bajaj Finance could achieve, but they've achieved incredible things.
So I don't think we should mix up Bajaj Finance, DMarts with the new gen listings, because the new gen listings in general, I'm not making any specific name here, but they have come on the back of a huge amount of spending. And if you still look at them, they are tiny companies, right? But the valuation is not tiny. I mean, you're looking at 1 lakh crores or something like that on the average for these companies. I mean, you're already pricing in a lot of that so-called growth. They are like 1,000, 2,000 crore, 2,500 crore top line companies trading at 30, 40, 50 times top line. I don't think DMart or Bajaj Finance ever traded those kinds of valuations, at least to the best of my knowledge. I think these companies, you're paying a lot for the future. And if the future is a little wobbly or new competition comes, these valuations can correct very, very sharply. So market is taking a bet right now. I'm not in the camp that wants to take that bet. just yet. I think they need to be down a lot for me to get interested in any of the new age listings.
Metals have corrected 15 to 20%. Some metal stocks even down more than 25%. 20% plus means you are in an official bear market. Do you think the bear market for metals and metal stocks has started?
I don't know whether it's safe to say the bear market is necessarily 20%, but I mean, metals in general, I've always maintained that it's not going to give you secular long-term bull market compounding. It's going to give you very, very cyclical, compressed return when they'll go up 5x in a matter of a year's time. That's the time you should really take money off the table. And I know there's a lot of debate on Twitter on sale and, people talking all the divergent opinions that, just because they become cheap because earnings have gone up and prices haven't gone up so much, the P is low, so you should sell because that's a conventional logic in metals. My view is that this sector overall is not a compounding sector. It's like a big one-time huge gain sector. Take your money off the table. I've taken money off the table on Tata Steels and Jindals of the world. And I think that's a rational way to play this. Like I said, when you take money off the table, Nico, it doesn't mean that you're going to sit on cash. It's always available choices. I find there are far better choices in the market than buying metals or buying auto companies. It's as simple as that.
शंकर, हमारे साथ ईटीना स्वदेश के व्यूअर भी जुड़ गए एंड ईटीना स्वदेश के व्यूअर जानना चाहते हैं कि 2020 में आपने शेयर बाज़ार में अगर निवेश करा तो आपका पैसा बना. 2021 में द ट्रेड वाज यू हैव टू बाय स्टॉक्स. 2021 में क्या ट्रेड रहेगा? क्या लॉन्ग शॉर्ट दोनों जाकर के पैसा बन सकता है?
नहीं, लॉन्ग में ही पैसा बनेगा, लेकिन वो लॉन्ग कब करना है ये आपको थोड़ी समझदारी से करना पड़ेगा. और ये आज का जो मार्केट है, जो ये करेक्शन बोलिए, जो भी बोलिए इसको, ये इस तरह को अपॉर्चुनिटीज को आपको ओपन आर्म से वेलकम करना चाहिए. इनमें घबराना नहीं चाहिए. जो कंपनियां हैं वो 400 रुपए पे अगर ठीक थी तो 300 रुपए पे और अच्छी हो गई. जस्ट बिकॉज ये करेक्ट हो गए डजंट मीन कि उनके फंडामेंटल्स कुछ खराब हो गए. मैं पूरी बात नहीं, मैं ऐसा नहीं कर रहा हूँ कि सारी कंपनियां इस तरह की आप देखो, लेकिन जो अच्छी कंपनियां हैं आप उसको उस मापदंड से देखिए कि अगर बिजनेस ठोस है, बिजनेस सही है, लेकिन प्राइस 30% 20% कम हो गए तो इसमें बुराई क्या है. तो आपको थोड़ा टाइमिंग रखना पड़ेगा मार्केट के लिए. 2022 में रिटर्न्स मेरे हिसाब से डेफिनेटली बनेंगे, भले वो 100% बने या ना बने, लेकिन आपको डेफिनेटली फिक्स्ड डिपॉजिट और गोल्ड के रिटर्न से तो बेटर ही बने.
शंकर, अगर आप इक्विटी का लॉन्ग टर्म एवरेज देखें तो इक्विटी में जो रिटर्न आता है वो 12 से 14% के बीच में आता है. पिछली दशक में भी वही रिटर्न था और हो सकता है इस दशक में भी वही रिटर्न आए. तो अगर लॉ ऑफ एवरेजेस देखे जाएं तो लगता है कि अगले 2-3 साल शेयर बाज़ार में डबल डिजिट रिटर्न आ सकता है. बिकॉज आंकड़े ये बता रहे हैं कि दैट वी आर इन दैट बीइंग लॉन्ग इज अ गुड ट्रेड.
या तो आपने मेरे लेक ऑफ रिटर्न्स थ्योरी की बात कर दी. बिकॉज लेक ऑफ रिटर्न्स यही कहता है कि जब रिटर्न के लेवल्स लो रहते हैं लेक में तो वो धीरे धीरे बढ़ते हैं और वो बढ़ के हो सकता है कि जहां थे वहां से डबल हो जाए. आपको लगेगा कि बहुत पानी भर गया लेक में, लेकिन लेक की जो कैपेसिटी है वो अभी भी फार हायर है. तो अगर आप देखिए 2008 से अभी तक के रिटर्न, मेरे ख्याल इंडिया के रिटर्न 7-8% ही हैं. लॉन्ग टर्म रिटर्न्स इंडिया के 12 से 15% के बीच में है. तो लेक में अभी कैपेसिटी हेडरूम काफी है. इसका मतलब ये नहीं होता है कि पानी लगातार भरता जाएगा विदाउट एनी नीड फॉर आउटलेट्स टू कर्व द शॉर्ट टर्म प्रेशर. करेक्शन को आप उस तरह देखें, एक सेफ्टी वॉल्व होता है कि थोड़ा पानी की सतह को थोड़ा कम किया जाता है, थोड़ा लेवल को कम किया जाता है, जिससे कि बिल्कुल वो उफान ना आ जाए. तो ये करेक्शन उस तरह से है, लेकिन वापस पानी भरेगा और वापस ये 15% के आप नंबर के आस एक औसत नंबर है. इससे हो सकता है कि आपको 20% भी मिले, लेकिन 2-3 साल मुझे नहीं लगता कि ये मार्केट आपको -20% रिटर्न देगा. आपको हो सकता है 10% दे, प्लस 15% दे, हो सकता है 25% दे. -10 वाला मुझे सिनेरियो नजर नहीं आता.
शंकर, आपने हमेशा मेंटेन करा है कि शेयर बाज़ार में लिक्विडिटी इवेंट न्यूट्रल होता है. एक बायर होता है, एक सेलर होता है. QIP और IPOs को हटा दें, मगर बायर सेलर हमेशा इक्वल होता है. तो क्या इस समय जो FI की सेलिंग आ रही है उससे हमने घबराना नहीं चाहिए? बिकॉज जी हाँ, FI बेच रहे हैं मगर सामने DIs खरीद भी रहे हैं.
नहीं, हम उस न्यूज पे फोकस करते हैं जो हमारी उस वक्त की मानसिकता को सूट करता हो. तो मार्केट अगर घट रहा है और FII की सेलिंग है तो हम दोनों को जोड़ के कहते हैं कि इसके चलते A के चलते B हो रहा है. लेकिन रियलिटी है दैट कि कोई कोई ले भी रहा है। और मैं कहता हूं साहब कि ओवर टाइम एफआईआईज की जो इन्फ्लुएंस इंडियन मार्केट पे वो घटती गई है। अगर आप आज देखें तो 3-4 करोड़ नए डीमैट अकाउंट्स आए मेरे मेरे ख्याल से। 50,000 रुपया भी अगर एक आदमी औसत दर पे डालता है मार्केट में, तो आप 2 लाख 2.5 लाख करोड़ की बाइंग पावर की बात कर रहे हैं साहब। एंड ये सारा पैसा जाता है मिड एंड स्मॉल में। इनको एचडीएफसी बैंक में और हिंदुस्तान लीवर लेने में कतई इंटरेस्ट नहीं है। अगर आप देखिए कोई कंपनी की मार्केट कैप 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 करोड़ रुपया है और वहां पर इतनी बाइंग पावर जाती है, तो आप एफआईआई को भूल जाइए साहब। हमारे डोमेस्टिक एक एक इंडिविजुअल स्मॉल इन्वेस्टर एक एफआईआई ऑन अ कलेक्टिव बेसिस बन चुका है। और ये हमारे लिए एक फख्र की बात है एज अ मार्केट की। हमें अब फॉरेन कैपिटल पे जरूरत है इंडिया को, लेकिन उतनी डिपेंडेंस नहीं है जितना कि आज से जब हमने करियर स्टार्ट किया था तब था। तो 2 लाख 2.5 लाख 3 लाख करोड़ की बाइंग पावर है। हो सकता है अगले साल तक ये और बढ़ जाए। उसके सामने एफआईआई की $5 बिलियन, ये 5,000 करोड़ रुपए क्या होता है साहब। मतलब मेरे ख्याल से ये बहुत अच्छा एक चेंज हुआ इंडिया में कि स्मॉल इन्वेस्टर्स ने आके एक बहुत बड़ा सपोर्ट दे दिया मार्केट को। इंडिविजुअली नहीं, लेकिन वो संख्या इतनी बड़ी है कि कलेक्टिवली एक बहुत ह्यूज फोर्स बन चुका है।
शंकर, एक दो एग्जाम्पल्स हैं जो अक्सर लोग बोलते हैं कि भाई ये जब साइकिल और ये जब सिचुएशन बार बार होती है, परिस्थितियाँ बार बार होती हैं, तो शेयर बाज़ार हमेशा पीक आउट होता है। एक आईपीओ मार्केट की एक्टिविटी, और भारत का सबसे बड़ा आईपीओ पेटीएम आया। पेटीएम का आईपीओ इतना सक्सेसफुल नहीं था, और कोइंसिडेंस बोले या फिर आप पैटर्न बोले, शेयर बाज़ार उसके आसपास पिक आउट हुआ। दूसरा, रिटेल और डीमैट एक्टिविटी। जब हम देखते हैं कि भाई रिटेल इन्वेस्टर टिप इन लिफ्ट का जब सिस्टम चालू हो जाता है तो केयरफुल रहना चाहिए। क्या ये दोनों फैक्टर्स वापस प्ले पर हैं?
हाँ, तो मैंने ट्वीट भी किया था कि जितनी बार अगर इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंकर्स अपने पैसे गिनने लगते हैं कि बोनस कितना मिलेगा ईयर एंड में, तो मार्केट कई बार, नहीं कहता हमेशा, लेकिन कई बार ये मार्केट टॉप आउट होता है। इन अ वे एक इंटरमीडिएट टॉप आउट हुआ मार्केट, बिकॉज ये सारे आईपीओ का रश आया, वो प्राइमरी मार्केट ने लिक्विडिटी सकआउट कर ली, और इस तरह की चीज बहुत बार हमने देखा है, पास में हुआ है। तो अगर इस तरह से आप मार्केट को देखें तो ये इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंकर जो एक जात है साहब, ये थ्राइव करती है इस तरह के मार्केट्स में जहां पर कि लोग पागलों की तरह पैसा डालते हैं आईपीओ मार्केट्स में। और लोगों ने डाला भी है, मेरे ख्याल से बहुत इनडिस्क्रिमिनेट इन्वेस्टिंग हुआ है from the retail segment. There is no doubt about it. In the IPO market in particular, in secondary market they have done a good job. In IPO market बहुत ज्यादा अनाप शनाप एप्लीकेशंस दे दिए गए बिना कुछ जाने समझे कि ये कंपनियां क्या है क्या नहीं है। एक तरह से पेटीएम को मैं धन्यवाद दूंगा कि उन्होंने अच्छा किया कि स्टॉक घटा, लोगों को नजर आया कि यार आईपीओ में ऐसा नहीं है कि वन वे स्ट्रीट है कि आपको हर बार पैसे बनेंगे ही बनेंगे। So overall, there has been a lot of indiscriminate bidding in the IPO market. थोड़ा सा इस प्रेशर कुकर को थोड़ा सा स्टीम लेट आउट करना जरूरी था। तो एक तरह से अच्छा ही हुआ है ना साहब, इसमें बुराई है क्या?
तो शंकर, आखिरी सवाल। रिलायंस और टीसीएस हिंदुस्तान की दो बढ़िया कंपनी हैं जिनकी मार्केट कैप $200 बिलियन से ऊपर है। फिर एक आपके पास $100 बिलियन मार्केट कैप का क्लब है, और फिर आपका $50 बिलियन का क्लब है। अगले 3 से 5 साल में कौन सी एक या दो कंपनी है जो $500 बिलियन क्लब में आ सकती है? कौन सी कंपनी है जो 100 से 200 में जा सकती है? और 50 वाली कौन सी जो 100 बन सकती है?
आप नाम पूछ रहे हैं तो नाम मेरे पास नहीं है, लेकिन ये मैं कह सकता हूं बहुत ही आश्वासन के साथ कि बहुत कंपनियां उत्पन्न होंगी जो उस लेवल से बड़ी बनेगी। बिकॉज इंडिया की इकोनॉमी की जो साइज है उसके रिलेटिवली स्पीकिंग हमारी कंपनियां अभी भी छोटी हैं। तो वाली रिलायंस एंड टीसीएस जो आपने नाम लिए, उसके नीचे कंपनियों की जो साइज है अभी भी छोटी है। अगर आप देखिए चाइना के कंपैरिजन में, और यूएस तो खैर छोड़ दीजिए, तो हमारी कंपनियों का अपवर्ड जो हेडरूम है वो बहुत है। अब चाहे तो एग्जिस्टिंग कंपनियां होंगी, न्यू लिस्टिंग्स होंगी, लेकिन आपको 5, 10, 25, 50 बिलियन की, मुझे तो लगता है 10, 20, 25 कंपनियां कम से कम बनेंगी अगले 2-3 साल के अंदर अंदर, और बननी भी चाहिए।
चलिए शंकर, आप हमारे साथ जुड़े। थैंक यू फॉर वॉकिंग अस थ्रू योर थॉट्स बोथ फॉर 18 Now English and for 18 Now Swadesh viewers. It was an excellent conversation. We've really covered a lot of aspects of what to do, what not to do, and more importantly why the thesis of bull market is still intact.
Thank you, Nico.